Hello, I would like to welcome you to today's TechNet Webcast, Microsoft Office Excel Services Technical Overview. For more Microsoft Webcasts, go to microsoft.com/webcasts. I would now like to introduce today's presenter, Chris Avis. Chris is an enthusiastic TechNet presenter who gets a huge rush when audience members realize, I didn't know I could do that. If you're lucky enough to see Chris in action, prepare to be entertained. He tells jokes, shows funny pictures, and ensures that learning new technologies is always fast-paced and engaging. He's even working on some simple magic tricks just to keep it fresh. Chris cites his father as a role model and would only trade in his IT badge for a second career as a limo driver. Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Well, we're gonna have to consolidate some of these bios here. I wasn't prepped for that one. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We've got a good session for you today. It's just an overview of the Office Excel services, kind of a joining of the Office products and SharePoint and what we can do with those things together. I have my email up on screen, so I'd encourage you to email me any questions that we don't get to today. Looks like I'm the only one in the session today, so I do encourage you to submit questions through the question manager. However, since it is just myself, I will spend as much time as I can at the end to wrap those up, but if I don't get to it, please take my email address and forward that on so we can get you taken care of. All right. With that, what are we going to cover today? First thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with just looking at how we can share our spreadsheet information out. The Excel services that it's part of the Office SharePoint Server 2007 product, and extends out the capabilities of Excel 2007 by allowing that sharing and the collaboration of the spreadsheet data. That gives us some improved manageability and security and the ability to reuse the spreadsheets across a server-based enterprise. And we can actually do some basic application development around those as well. We're going to look at some of the business intelligence capabilities on this. Excel is most widely used as a tool for doing data analysis and reporting services, but as a business intelligence tool, the Excel 7000 product becomes even more powerful by putting some integration in with SQL Server analysis services and gives us some of those rich user analysis tools that we get to make use of from SQL. Finally, we'll wrap up with some Excel services architecture. This really consists of a web front end and an application server tier. The Excel calculation server itself loads requested spreadsheets and performs any calculations that are required. The Excel web access rendering capabilities allow us to render this inside of HTML, while the Excel web services provide a web services interface and front end to allow us access to those spreadsheets through SharePoint. All right. So some helpful experience here. What you should really know right now to take something out of this session. If you've done some work with the SharePoint server, either the Portal server product or the Windows SharePoint services, that would be a big benefit. And then, of course, working with Excel. Hopefully everyone has worked with an Excel spreadsheet at some point in their life. All right, we're going to start this off with just a few slides, and then we're going to jump straight into the first demo on this. So let's go ahead and introduce this out. So spreadsheets, they're the most common thing that businesses use for data modeling, reporting services, analysis, sharing information about organizations. Now, organizations now, with the changing times we have, are really confronted with the need to efficiently share those spreadsheets across the entire organization and do it securely without having any extended liability as a result of that. So Excel services, it's part of the SharePoint Server 2007 product. It includes an integrated set of server-based spreadsheet services and functions that complement the actual application, Excel itself. So those Excel services, they were designed from the ground up. It's a server-side set of technologies that can be fully integrated in with Excel 2007 and extends all of that out into a natively multi-user format. So let's go ahead and get into this. We'll jump into this. Oh, well, actually, let me mention one other thing around this. There is a two-tier architecture to this of Excel services. It simplifies the deployment of the Excel services within the SharePoint environment as well. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on. There's the Excel calculation server. It loads requests that are and it performs the required calculations, and then it caches those results in a per-user instance. The Excel web access side of this, again, renders the spreadsheets out in HTML, and it doesn't even have to have an ActiveX control to do this. We just present this out through a standard web browser. So here we go. So Office Excel 2007, what this does is it really delivers a new results-oriented interface, pivot tables that are much easier to create and use, which is a good thing because I'm not a real big pivot table person. It enhances our formula offering, it provides rich data visualization, and a much, much faster way to create professional-looking charts and tables that can either be used in presentations or just help us analyze the data that we work with. Now, analyzing the information with Excel 2007 to gain insight and make more informed decisions about this, really we've done some things around simplifying the interface and creating some very advanced tools to make creating and analyzing that data much simpler to do. Now, Excel 2007 also has improved support for tables. It allows you to create, format, expand, and refer to tables within the formulas themselves. When analyzing that data, contained, say, in such a, let's say, a large table, Excel 2007 keeps table headings in view while you scroll, so you can keep that information kind of on screen and available for you. You can also build much more professional-looking charts faster with fewer clicks using the charting tools that are new in Excel 2007 within the interface. You can also apply very rich visual elements to the charts, such as 3D soft shadowing, transparencies. You can create and interchange with the charts the same way, regardless of which application you're using. So this charting engine that's a part of Excel 2007 is actually consistent across the other Office applications, such as Word and PowerPoint. Excuse me. So some of the other things we provide in this rich visualization schemes is things like gradients and thresholds. There's a performance indicator icon to help you discover the patterns and maybe even highlight trends inside of the data that you might need to pull out and extrapolate. You can summarize, you can reorient, you can find all the different answers you need with the pivot table and the pivot chart views. And these are much easier to create inside of Excel 2007 than they were in the previous versions. You can even use the flexibility and the new cube functions that are built into Excel 2007 to create custom reporting from, let's say, an online analytical processing database that you have. So you can directly withdraw the data from SQL databases and create that charting environment inside of Excel. You can even connect to external resources or sources of data to more easily access that information using the data connection libraries that are inside of Excel 2007. That leads us into our very first demo. So in this first demo, we're just going to look at some of the different features inside of Excel 2007. We're going to, first thing we're going to work off is working with the Excel 2007 data connections. So what I have here is a Windows 2003 server, SharePoint portal server is installed to this as well, or excuse me, Office SharePoint server I should say. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up Excel. And as we know, Excel is it's a very, very powerful tool. It's used for a lot of different things. We can use this to analyze, communicate, manage all the different types of information that we have. But what I'm going to do is I want to show you how to get data from external sources. In this case, and oh, by the way, if you haven't seen Excel 2007, this menu bar that we have at the top of this is our new ribbon menu bar. And basically it breaks out the different Excel commands into categories. So instead of having to click a menu drop-down item and expand that out, you actually click these tabs and all of the information is presented right there on the first page. So let's go ahead and go to Data. And we're going to go ahead and use some of the options here for Get External Data. And you can see here also in the menu bar that it's broken up into categories. It's more logically arranged for us. So what I'm going to do is use Get External Data. We can actually have options here for getting straight from access from the web, from a text file. You may have some existing ODBC connections that you might want to use. In this case, we're going to use from other data sources. And we can pull this from a SQL server, from analysis services, from use a data connection wizard. We can even pull it in from XML or even a Microsoft query. So let's say, for example, when you work with a multi-dimensional database inside of Excel 2007, such as SQL Server Analysis Services. You can use OLAP formulas to build really complex, very free-form OLAP data-bound reports as a part of this. And there's some new cube functions that are used to extract that OLAP data from the analysis services and display that inside of a cell. So we've talked about some of these different ways of importing this data in. Let's go ahead and pull some data in from a SQL server. So we're going to provide the server name here, which my server name is called Moss. I'm going to use just Windows authentication, but you could provide unique credentials if you're using SQL Auth. We'll make our connection in. From here, we have a list of databases that we can select to work with. I'm going to use our standard AdventureWorks database. And then I'm going to expand this out so that we have a little bit better view. You can see our windows inside are now actually, there's a term for it which I haven't called, but they're expandable, so you don't have to do as much scrolling for the lists. So you can expand these out, see more information as well, and that also is standard across all of the Office applications. So we're going to use a sample database that's provided with SQL 2005, our AdventureWorks database. We're going to review some of the performance of the global sales force inside of this. So we pulled up AdventureWorks. We're going to go ahead and choose the salesperson, which I think is down here at the very bottom. We're going to use the salesperson table. And let's see, I think all the rest of this information is what I need here. It's all set. It is. So we're going to go ahead and finish. And then we have some options here. We are connecting out to a live data source for this. The ability to refresh that data from the back-end server is going to vastly improve our ability to run analysis on the business data. So you can refresh the external pages in a data range automatically when you open up the workbook, and actually save that workbook out without saving the external data, so that the workbook file size itself is actually reduced. You don't have as much data in the actual spreadsheets themselves. All right, so in this case, we are going to, let's see, we'll look at our properties here. And let's see, we can see we have the enable background refresh, which will refresh that data for us automatically. We can do OLAP server formatting, so we can format the information there. We can also do a drill through to see how many records we want to receive back through that OLAP connection. And if we go to our definition tab, the definition tab is going to list out all of the information that's stored in the connection file, along with the file location itself. So the commands listed in the connection string field, those are going to define how Excel pulls the data from the databases. So in this case, Excel pulls information from the database, applies some basic formatting that makes it easy to read, and we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, and OK here. Pulls this data in for us. All right, so we've got our data pulled up, and you can see it's formatted out. We have different categories here, and let's just take our territory ID. If we select this, we actually have some filtering that we can do against this as well. So it applies this filtering to each of the columns, and since we found this to be one of the best first tasks that users will take when working with large data sets, we've arranged it in this way to just make it easier to work. So for example, the regional sales manager may only want to be interested in the performance of salespeople in their own territories, for instance. So by clearing the filtered data information out, all of this is just really as simple for that person to get this data as just applying a filter out. So by default, we have it set to select all. We'll go ahead and deselect that. And we can then select only certain fields if we want to pull this data out, and it's going to filter this automatically. And of course, this is going to extend out to each of the data columns that we've pulled in through this data connection. It also marks the icons here so that we know that this particular column has a filter that's set, so it gives us a visual indication of our filtering that we have in play. So I'm going to go back here, set this back to select all. Now when you analyze the data, you're often looking to compare that data looking for high and low values. Excuse me. Or maybe you're even going to search for numbers that are outside of an expected range of values. So we have some options around conditional formatting that will help you easily find the cells by highlighting specific values. So I'm just going to pick a column here. I'm going to pick column F. You go back here to my Home tab, and then we have some styles that we can put in place. Part of that is conditional formatting. So the conditional formatting allows us to apply values that will format the cells or a range of cells in a particular format for us. So if I go to conditional formatting, there's a drop down here, and we can do color scales. And as you highlight these, one of the nice new features about all of the Office products is that we have a preview mode built in. So when you go to select something as, say you're going to change the color of text, the font of the text, color styles in this case with our conditional formatting, as we hover over these, we actually see what it's going to look like before we click on it, and it's not a destructive process. In other words, this is a preview. If I simply come back up here and click outside of that window, it doesn't actually apply any of those changes. Let's go ahead and do some conditional formatting with this. So we'll go ahead and click this little drop down here. We'll go back to color scales. And as we click these, you can see it does this conditional formatting for us. And if we go back and look at these color scales, you can actually set up a number of rules on this that tell us how we want this to be formatted out. Select different types of scales. The minimum lowest value, the highest value is the maximum, and it changes that color gradient for us automatically based upon the values that are inside of those cells. Now we also have the ability to use icon sets as a part of this, and we can use those to annotate and classify data in a variety of different categories with a separated threshold value on each one. So we go back to our conditional formatting here. Let's go out here and we'll clear our rules out. We'll clear it on the selected cells. Oh, and you know what? I need to select them first. So there they are. Clear our rules out on our selected cells. And now if we go to conditional formatting, we look at our icon sets. Let's say, for example, in the 3 arrows icon set, which is right here. In the 3 arrows icon set, the red arrow, which I actually had the wrong one highlighted. There it is. Sorry about that. The red arrow is going to represent higher values. Yellow sideways arrows are going to represent our middle values. The green arrow is going to represent the lower values. So you can use this feature to help identify trends in your data as well. So let's take this another step further. Let's look at some of the pivot table features that we have. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over to my other sheet. Let's go ahead and pull in some additional data here. We'll go back to our data tab. We'll pull in some data from some other sources. We'll pull this back in from our SQL server. Go to my MOS server again. We're going to use our AdventureWorks database again for this. And we're going to use that salesperson table. And we'll finish this out. And this is just asking us if we want to replace an existing file. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and do so for my demo. We don't need to do anything special with the data, so we'll leave this as is. There we go. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at our, let's see, we're going to look at our pivot table. It looks like I might have, hold on just a moment. I need to make sure I've got the right data imported here. You know what? I may need to re-import this because I don't think I have the right data on screen. So let me go ahead and close this out, and we'll do this as another re-import. We'll try this again. All right, so data, pull in from other sources. We'll go from our SQL server. My server is my MOS server. Next, we're going to use our AdventureWorks database. We're going to use the salesperson table. There they are. We'll finish this out. We'll say yes to this. And, oh, that's why I did it wrong. I didn't do the correct table here. We did need on the import data, we were doing a pivot table example, and I left it as table, so that's why it came up incorrectly. So we'll do the pivot table report. We're all good there. Now we should get a dialog. There it is on the right-hand side. It's going to allow us to sort specific fields for this. So we have a variety of fields that we can check. I'm just going to use these last 5 fields, our territory ID, sales, sales quota, salesperson, sales last year. I just want to pull in some specific sales data on this. So let's say with this, in this particular example, we have information workers, they're varying skill levels. We can now create pivot tables or a pivot chart in a few steps. With the pivot field list, we can view or select fields that we want to include by using a clear side-by-side view, which is over here on the right-hand side. And if you need to pose any other type of question against your data, you can drag fields in different orders to alter the hierarchy of the information. We're going to look at this feature a little bit later on in the demos. So we've created this information. Now what we're going to do is, with these pivot table and pivot chart views, these can play a central role inside of the Excel 2007 support of the analysis services that we have inside of SQL 2005. So that SQL analysis services aspect of this provides kind of a semantic model for your business, and it's called Unified Dimensional Models. And this helps define business logic, calculations, and even metrics as a part of this. And the UDM also serves as a single data source for all the reports, spreadsheets, the OLAP processing for the browsers, etc., that you might need to put in play. So we're going to take this a little bit further. So we've imported this data, we've selected some of these fields off, but we're going to extend this out a little bit further. We're going to combine some pivot charts and pivot tables together on some of this data. So we're going to import some more data one more time. We'll go back up here to data from other sources. We'll go ahead and pull from our SQL Server yet again, our MOS server. Next, go back to our AdventureWorks database. We're going to use our salesperson option again. Where is salesperson? There they are right there. And we'll finish this out. Say yes to this again. And this time we're going to combine our pivot chart and pivot table reports together. And we're going to select a few fields out here. So like pivot tables, the pivot charts become a much easier way to create the information in a new user interface. So all the filtering improvements that are also available for pivot tables, they're in the pivot charts. And when you create a pivot chart, specific pivot chart tools and context menus become available so that you can sort and look at and analyze that data in the chart. You can even change the layout, the style, the format of the chart, or any of its elements the same way that you would with a regular chart. And inside of Excel 2007, the chart formatting that you apply, that gets preserved when you make changes to the pivot chart. So this is a big improvement over the way this worked in our earlier versions of this. So let's keep going with this. So you can also copy these charts from Excel, place them directly inside of other documents if we would like. So what I'm going to do is we're going to select some options here. Let's go ahead and take our pivot chart. Let's do territory ID just like we did last time. Let's go ahead and do our sales year to date, and we'll do sales last year. And as I select these options, these elements from the pivot table are inserted into the pivot chart automatically. And, oh, well, there we go. And so you can add or subtract any of these as we want. But to go to the point of them being a part of the chart itself, if we take and close this, go to the edge of the chart, right-click it, and do a copy. And if we minimize this out and go out to PowerPoint, as an example, we'll do a blank presentation inside of PowerPoint. We'll take out our text elements that are here. Just delete these out real quick. And you'll see that now that data that we took from the Excel worksheet here, we copied that chart. We can paste that in, and all of those elements are going to stay the same. Now from here we can take and expand this out and size this out so it's the exact same size as the spreadsheet, or excuse me, as the PowerPoint presentation if we would like. And this can actually be configured so that this particular spreadsheet, or excuse me, PowerPoint presentation is linked to the data. So as the data inside of the SQL database changes, we can export that out through Excel directly into this PowerPoint presentation so that it stays up to date for any of the presentations that you do. So not only can we do this in the PowerPoint, we can export these or paste these directly into the other Office applications. This process is not just taking a snapshot for the graph. You can actually resize it without distorting all of the contents. In addition to that, since the object retains a copy of the data used to build the chart, If you want to change the chart type, you can actually do that without having to return out to Excel. So if we take and, let's go back here and get the edge of this so that we can actually see this. If we right-click on this, we can actually change the chart type right on the fly using the exact same data. So let's say we want to use a three-dimensional cone or pyramid type. We select that, click OK, and that data gets refreshed automatically. And it's actually going to resize my windows for me. It's not what I was expecting. Oh, and you know what? I should have taken this and shrunk this down. So just a moment. And what I meant to do, let's do a Control Z to get that out. What I meant to do is click in the chart itself, change chart type. Now let's go to our three-dimensional pyramid. There we go. And so you can change these on the fly based upon the type of presentation or the type of data that you have. Maybe it's more appropriate to have a line chart versus a three-cone pyramid. But the point we're trying to make here is that we can easily change this data on the fly, and it doesn't require significant data manipulation or any real expertise in creating charts or formatting or any of that information. It's very simple for us to do. It's very easy, very effective. Oh, we don't want to close that out. We just want to shrink it so we can get a better size on it. There we go. And let's just give one more example here. We'll change the chart type one more time. You can see that we have a rather extensive list of different charts. We do these as area charts, scatter charts, stock charts, surface charts. And again, it really just depends on the type of data that you're trying to display. So for instance, a radar chart for this data may not work out too well. So you might want to take and put that back to some sort of a 3D based chart. So some more options for presenting data out through charts. So if we go back to our Excel spreadsheet, we're going to go back and we're going to go back to our Sheet 1 data. Let's maximize this out. And let's see, let's take column B, and we're going to use some additional data with this as well. And it looks like, let's see, did I modify this? There is no F and G column here. So let's see, we'll go F, G. We're going to take this, and we're going to insert some data. No, I may have incorrect data for this one for this particular insert process. So hold on just a moment. Let me go ahead and pull this back in again. We don't need that. So let's go ahead and import this data in to make sure I have the right columns set for this. So data, other sources, SQL, my MOS server. Use our AdventureWorks database, and our sales person again. Salesperson, finish. Yes, we do. We don't need to change any of this data. There we go. This is what I wanted. All right, so we're going to take and we're going to highlight a couple of different columns here. So it may appear that you have to make some of the display decisions before importing the data in from an outside database. So we've worked to make Excel 2007 a little bit more flexible so that you can take advantage of the features when you need them. So let's recreate our territory sales chart from that first table view that we did inside the spreadsheet. So I'm going to highlight some data. So this is that sales data that we did before. We'd done it through the pivot chart in the previous example. What I'm going to do now is, let's see, we'll go over here to Insert. We're going to insert some data in. Let's go to Charts. And in Charts, well, let's see, we'll go to a column one. And let's see, we'll select a 3D cone, which is right here. And you can see that it builds that same chart for us off of the data. I simply selected the columns. I used the Control button on the keyboard so I can select multiple columns. And then from there I can then go to Insert and we select the different chart styles. And you can take and modify these very easily and create some very, very nicely formatted charts on the fly with that data. So it's very, very simple to work with this information now. Now we can also change the chart type as well. So let's go over here to Chart Type, just as we did before. And let's see, for our templates, we can change this out to a bar real easily. Click OK. And you can see it modifies that chart for us very easily on the fly. I think I've kind of driven that part of this home for us, so I think we're pretty good on that. So let's jump back into our slides here. Actually, let me close this out. So we'll have a fresh spreadsheet to work with when we come back in. All right. There we go. All right, so this is a server-side solution. This enables you to secure the data that you're sharing and the logic and reuse all of this across the enterprise. And it provides a single, centrally managed version of the spreadsheet data for essentially what you would call a single version of the truth. The author simply saves his or her spreadsheet out to a SharePoint document library, and then you can grant specific users, groups, or roles access to the server-generated version of that spreadsheet inside of a browser. So Excel services provide two primary interfaces. There's a web-based UI for viewing the spreadsheets in a browser, and then there's a web services interface, and that's provided for programmatic level of access. Now the web user, or the web-based user interface, which is called Excel Web Access, that allows the users to have both an interactive and read-only access to the spreadsheets, depending on what's necessary. And it also does this inside the browser by means of DHTML, so dynamic HTML. We aren't using any ActiveX controls in this, nor is the installation of any type of a rich client necessary. So to use these functions, you would not have to have the Office products loaded. You would simply need to have a browser so that you can access the data. Now the web services interface, that enables an external server and its applications to directly access that spreadsheet data. Makes use of the business logic without needing a developer to, say, re-engineer it all inside of code, which would be a cumbersome and time-intensive process. So in both cases, only the data that is specified by the spreadsheet author is available. So you do have control of what gets exposed out. Now, the formulas and other business logic that underlie all of that data, that still remains protected as a result of this. Now, in order to better understand the Excel services, it's also necessary to describe what it is not. So first and most importantly, it is not simply the Excel client hosted on a server. The Excel services themselves, this is a new server-based technology, and it's designed from the ground up to be scalable and, of course, very robust. It is also not a spreadsheet creation tool. You'd still use your standard Excel application for that. Authoring spreadsheets, that's going to require the rich client. That's Excel 2007. Users can, however, interact with the spreadsheets through the Excel Services browser client, subject to the restrictions defined by the spreadsheet author, or, as we mentioned before, we can do this programmatically through the Web Services API on the server side. Now, this model provides the ability on the part of the spreadsheet author to build the spreadsheet the way he or she wants and to restrict the data consumers only to the interactions that the author chooses through that browser-based access. Now, another important aspect of the Excel services model is that in a simultaneous multi-user environment, each user has his or her own session in the server's memory, so they'll all be isolated from each other. The server is going to load a read-only instance of the workbook in memory. Each user has its own separate session representing his or her state. If the user applies a filter to a spreadsheet, other users are not going to see that filtered data because everybody is isolated in their own memory space. Also, their interactions do not modify the original file. So this behavior actually is identical whether the spreadsheet is being viewed in the browser or if it's being done programmatically through the Web Services interface. So this is going to take us into our next demo, which is designing a simple application. First thing we're going to need to do is create a trusted location for the data that we're going to store this at. So bring up our demo environment again. All right, in this case, what I'm going to do is bring up the SharePoint administration console. And we need to create a trusted location that we can access from our applications, in this case, Excel. So I have a shared services site already set up. And we have a whole section here for the Excel services. And what we need to do is set up a trusted file location. Now from this page, you can access areas to configure the trusted file locations. trusted data connection libraries, even the trusted data providers. We're going to touch on those a little bit later on in the session. Now currently I have one set up currently to my MOS server for the SharePoint services, and it has this type of data, our trusted data connection libraries and our embedded information. So I'm going to need to add another trusted file location for this. And this location is going to be out to my own personal administrative site, so I can house all of my documents in my own location. So we'll go ahead and set this up. I know the name of my server. We also in SharePoint typically set these up with specific ports. And that, of course, can be saved out as the aspects of the link that you might want to provide out to other people. Let's see, my personal. We'll go to administrator. Make sure I spelled this correctly. And we'll just make sure that that's correct. By taking and highlighting that, we'll open up a browser. We'll paste this link in, verify that we can access it before saving this out. Oh, and I see one typo already. We'll correct that. Let's go ahead and make sure that we can access this data. Nope, what do I have misspelled here? It's MOS, it's 36342, personal, administrator, shared documents. Looks like that's the correct URL, so let's try this one more time. So MOS, personal, administrator. Take that out. Make sure that's a 0. And document. So we'll try it here. Go ahead and save that out. I think this all looks accurate, but we're going to come back in. I'm going to try and paste this back in one more time to verify it. And if it doesn't work, we'll see what happens. We'll try and move forward. Let's try this as an SSL paste as well, just in case it's secured with SSL. I think we would have received a notice if it was. All right, well, I'm going to move forward on this just in the interest of time. We'll see if it fails when we go to save it, but that should be the correct URL for my particular site. So let's go back here. Actually, let's try it this way. We'll try one other option here. Nope, doesn't seem to be coming up. So I think we're going to have a little bit of an issue when we go to save our documents here coming up, but we'll see what happens. All right, so let's move forward. Let's go ahead and open up an Excel spreadsheet. We'll try and do some data here. We'll see if we'll be able to save this out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a basic mortgage calculator inside of Excel. This can be a mortgage calculator you can use. You can place this out on your website, so it provides a web-based mortgage calculation scheme. So let's just use a few options here. So let's see, mortgage term, it's going to be for 30. We'll give it an option of years. And let's see, for A2, we'll put an interest rate of 6.25, if you're lucky enough to lock in at that rate. And interest rate. And let's see here, we'll do a loan amount of $500,000. And then we're also going to, we'll write up a few formulas to work with the data provided. We'll start by changing the interest rate into a decimal by multiplying a cell out. And we'll do that down here. And we'll say, let's see, A2, where our interest rate is at. We're going to take and multiply that out by 0.001. Oh, and I have to put an equal sign in front of that to get it to work. There we go. In the next few cells, we're going to add some formulas required to come up with a monthly payment. So for A7, we're going to go ahead and take, we'll add the interest, or we'll add 1 to the interest rate and raise that to a power of the number of monthly payments that we have. So we'll say equals power 1 plus our A6 interest rate, comma, A1 times our number of payments. There we go. And the last formula will calculate the monthly payment based upon the dollar amount that's borrowed on the interest rate. So in cell A4, we'll go ahead and put this in as equals A3 times A7 times A6. And we'll divide that out by our A7 minus 1 value. There we go. So at this point, since this is a dollar amount, we need to change the format of these. So for A3 and A4, we're going to go ahead and change the format of these out to a dollar amount. So we'll change this to currency. So we can see these. So these are our amounts. These are our monthly payments on this. Now we're going to take the first three cells. We're going to make those editable when viewed inside of an Excel web access sheet. So we'll need to create a series of named ranges. So the first named range will be the number of years in the mortgage. So we're going to click cell A1. We're going to go to our formulas tab. And for our named cells, we're going to take and we're going to name a range. And we'll give this a name of years. For 2, we'll name this range, and we'll just call this our interest rate. And one thing to note is if you put a space in here, which I'm going to do right now, if you add a space, it's actually going to throw an error. So you have to make sure that these are all without spaces in the names. And then finally, for our mortgage amount, we'll name a range, and we'll call this mortgage amount. And then we're going to select a group of cells. We'll go A1 through B4. And we're going to give this, this is the last thing we're going to do since we don't need to display the formulas in the 6th and 7th rows. We're going to create a new named range containing only the cells that we want to show out to the customer. So we're going to show just the base value information. We're going to give this a named range as well, and we'll call this one mortgage calc for our mortgage calculation range. Now the parameters tab that we can use here, excuse me, for the parameters tab, where did we go here? Where's our options? Oh, I'm not seeing my parameters tab. So let's go back to home, see if we can find this. Just a moment. Oh, I know why. Because we haven't published this out yet. And this is where we're going to see whether or not our publishing is going to work. So we'll try and publish this out through Excel services. I'm going to go out and actually it doesn't look like it's going to show up here at all. But normally you would have, if that link worked previously, we would have an option here to go out to a SharePoint site. You know what? I'm going to try one more time to see if I can get that to come up because it had to have been something just as simple as a typo. So if you can bear with me one more second on this. All right, we'll go to our shared services. You know what? It may be that I don't actually have my site actually set up. So let's go ahead and select this and see. Yes, it's going to need to create my site. So that's why the error was coming up. There's actually some information that I had not gotten set up yet. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is, this takes about 2 or 3 minutes to go and work forward. I'm going to bounce back to the slides, talk to some of the slides for a moment, and then we'll come back out and finish this demo out because that's what was preventing me from setting up that one shared space. So I think what I'll do is I'll actually come out, I'll look at questions in the queue, and go from there. All right, so one from Odkin, when filtering, can you OR the multiple filters? So can we use some Boolean logic on this? And I believe that we can. So you can use ands and ors as a part of this process. If you want some more information on how to do that, they have a lot of information published out on the SharePoint and the Excel services site. At the end of this presentation, there are some links I'm going to provide to you where you can get some more information about that. Can you talk more about OLAP and Cube? Well, Kathy, that's actually very, very broad. And I have to admit I am not a SQL expert by any means. So if you have some specific questions or some information you'd like to know about that, send me an email at chris.avis@microsoft.com. I can pass that on to our SQL team and get some answers for you in regards to that. All right. So I tell you what, those are the only two questions that we have in here. But if you want to continue to submit that, I'm going to guess that that is done building my site. And I can probably at this point go back in and build that. And it is not. It is still building. So we're going to give it just another second because I don't want to go bouncing back and forth on these. But what we're going to do is we're going to, when we get done with this, I'm going to create that URL set for me for the site. We'll get that added in, and that should enable the publishing for us when we go to publish this Excel spreadsheet and give us our options. Excellent. I think it's going to work fine this time. So let's go ahead and close out of this. Let's see. Yes, we do. All right. So I'm going to close out of this. We'll go back into the SharePoint administration. We'll put in that trusted site, and we'll see if we can't get this to work for us again. So we'll go back to our shared services. We'll add a trusted file location. We have this in here now. Let's see if we can get this to work for us. I'm going to take this URL. We're going to copy this out, see if it resolves. And I'm going to bet that it does this time. This is looking better. Not an immediate failure. All right, so again, in the interest of, oh, there we go. All right, it looks like it's going to work fine for us this time. So let's go back out here to our Excel spreadsheet. All right, so we had taken this, we had formatted this out, we had named our different ranges on this. So let's go out here so we can get this to publish out. So we'll publish, we'll go to Excel Services, and check it out. There's my site. So we'll drill into my site. There we go. And you can see that it presents us directly the SharePoint interface. So we're linking Excel directly into SharePoint at this point. We have the different document libraries that we can work with. If you have additional sites and workspaces, you can save there. I specifically added a trusted site as shared documents. So we're going to drill into shared documents, and we'll see if we can share or save this document out for us. So we'll call this Mortgage Calc, and we'll see if we can save it. So we'll cross our fingers. Oh, another error. Well, I honestly can't tell you what the issue is with this. We obviously have access to the site. If we go in through this particular link, the site is there. And I don't think there's going to be anything in the way of permissions that are preventing this, but we'll just do a real quick check to see. Here's our shared documents. We'll just look at this to make sure, but since I created the site, it should have full permissions to this, so everything should be fine. But we'll just give it a real quick check. So let's see here. I am the Litware administrator. I have full control, access on this, so everything should be fine. Well, I honestly can't tell you why it's not actually letting me publish this, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show you the publishing and accessing the site. We'll try and save it one more time. Let's go out here. We've got all the options set. Our parameters are set. Let's see here. Let's just select these options just to make sure. Nope, unfortunately it's not saving out. So I do apologize for not being able to show that aspect of the demonstration here. All right, let's go ahead and head back to the slides and we'll get that portion of this taken care of and we'll move on to the next demonstration. All right, so the next portion of this, we're going to be talking about how we now have with the ability to publish out the spreadsheets when it actually works to the SharePoint server. You need complete control over the content of the shared spreadsheet itself as well as the ability to secure that data, especially when you have proprietary formulas that are going to be involved with this. So during this portion of the presentation, we're going to explore how the Office SharePoint 2007 system manages the spreadsheets, keeps the data private, and we'll start exploring the problems typically associated with sharing out this type of data. So SharePoint 2007, it increases the ability of your businesses to securely share that data through the spreadsheets, and it gives you greater control over that data while also meeting the requirements in terms of things like reliability, scalability, and availability. It also enables Excel to participate in interactive business intelligence dashboards and portals. So as you set up SharePoint sites for teams, you have dynamic data that you need to display out that gets updated on a frequent basis. You can actually link those spreadsheet formulas into SharePoint, and that data can be dynamically updated as people enter it. They can see that refreshed on the fly. So it provides browser-based access to the spreadsheets. Those are all essentially stored and managed on the servers, and that addresses some very key enterprise requirements that we see today. Now the Excel services, that centralizes the management and provides the control over the spreadsheets themselves. The spreadsheet authors, they use the familiar Excel 2007 tool sets to create the spreadsheets, and that contains all of the data and the functionality that they need to explicitly define which portions of the spreadsheets are going to be accessible. Then after they're published out to the server environment, they're securely there for the sharing aspect of it. When you go to view those spreadsheets in a web browser, the users that are not able, or the users aren't able to edit the spreadsheets unless we give some additional control. Users can interact with the data values only as the parameters that must be explicitly defined by the author during that publication process or through some sort of filtering, sorting, navigation of the tables, or the pivot tables as a part of this. Now the business intelligence solutions that we have with this brings together data from multiple data sources and different repositories, and we display that data in meaningful ways. Excel 2007 and the Excel services, they both support a very rich set of functionality for connecting to the data sources. We saw some of that earlier with being able to pull out of SQL, other types of data, even standard ODBC type connections, flat text files if we want to do that for import. This makes it easier to create these business intelligence solutions for us. That leads us into our next set of demos. Now in this demonstration, we're going to connect the Excel services back to the back-end SQL environment again. We're going to create a pricing list. And unfortunately, the end of this also has a publishing aspect of it, so we aren't going to be able to publish it. But we'll go ahead and create the data. You'll be able to see what we have inside the spreadsheet. We just won't be able to publish it out to the site to show it through the web interface. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close out this particular spreadsheet. We'll open up a new one. All right, and let's see, we'll go to our data. We'll get data from our external SQL server again. This is our MOS server one more time. We're going to use a different database for this one, though. We're going to use our AdventureWorks DW database. And we're going to select some slightly different fields on this one. We're going to use our DIM, where is it at? DIM product. There it is. And we don't need to change this data at all. Oh, actually, you know what? We do. So I'm going to have to back that up and re-import. We need to change that to a pivot table report. So let me do this re-import again. All right, data, get from other sources. SQL, my MOS server, get our AdventureWorks DW database. We use our DIM product. There it is. And yes, we'll replace that file. We need to select this as our pivot table report. That gives us the items that we can select in our pivot table field list, which I had missed before. And let's see, what are we going to use here? We'll use our model name. We'll use our product key. We'll use our list price. We'll do dealer price, color, and size. There it is, dealer price, color. We'll do size, which is further down. And you know, we'll also look at the product line as a part of this as well. So this particular database contains a lot of information about all of the different products that we have. It includes typical product name, pricing, along with some other information that we may not have or that may not be immediately relevant to the customers. Maybe such things as how long it takes to manufacture an item, item descriptions in multiple languages. These fields, they're really more for our own use in planning and publishing, say, an international catalog or something. So we're going to provide out to our distributors only the information that they really need when they order the product. As we add these fields out, you can see that when we did that, Excel is automatically placing them in the pivot table based on the type of information that the field contains. Now, since it may not necessarily represent the information in this way that you want, you can use the pivot table field list pane to rearrange the items as needed. So if we go out to, let's see here, we can, let's see, we'll do this, we'll do this drop zones only 2 by 2. So we get a slightly different format. And let's start by rearranging this data and creating some columns for the list price and the dealer information. So let's see, we'll take list price, and if we drop that down, we'll do that, we'll move that to values. We'll take the dealer price list, we'll do the same thing with that. And let's see, it appears that our Excel applies to formatting to this that we may need to overrule. It's listing the product key and the pricing information as sums and counts. So we'll change this formula to only list the lowest listed price in each field, and we'll apply this to each of the 3 columns. So let's see, we'll go to, let's see, sum of the product key. And let's see, we'll take, set this to, let's see, data field settings. We'll set this to min. We'll do the same thing at the count of list price, which is this one, and min. And as you see, as we make these changes, it actually updates this inside of our pivot table for us automatically. Let's go ahead and, let's see, count of dealer price. We'll do that as well. Set it to min. We'll also add a report filter to this spreadsheet. It's going to allow our distributors to filter our products based upon the product lines themselves. So for product line, we'll take and remove that to, or move that to a report filter. We can go ahead and close out this filter pane now. So this way, if they want to look only at our product line of, say, cycling accessories, they can filter the catalog by a product line S that we have. So product line, we do our filtering here. S is for our cycling accessories. We select this. That's going to filter it down to just our cycling accessories for us. Now for formatting purposes, we'll set the cell format for our price columns to display this out as currency. So we'll take our C and use the control button to select this as well. We'll go ahead and format these out as currency. So we have a little bit better format to this, and we can see that as dollar signs. So let's go ahead and let's explore some of the pivot table options on this now. So to control the behavior of the pivot tables, we can access the options dialog box for this. So let's go out here to cell A1 and pivot table tools. That's what we're looking for. And what this is going to do, the layout and format tab list options such as indenting, centering of the text, auto-fitting, etc., that all helps us deal with the formatting of these as well. So let's go out here to, let's see, we've got some pivot table options. And we can change the layout and format. So we can merge cells together if we like. We can change how we do the grand totals for the rows, etc. I think we're actually going to take and do some of this. So let's go ahead and take and change some of this information around. We'll do that here in a moment. Let's see. So in the layout group, let's see, we'll go to our design tab up here in a moment. Let's take that. So, oh, you know what? I missed the data. There it is. There's our design tab. That's what I wanted. So for the numbers appear on this to be running together too much in the current form that we have. So let's turn off some of the subtotals and the grand totals that are showing up here. So let's see. For this, we'll go for our layout group. For our subtotals list, let's click the drop down. We'll say do not show subtotals, so we don't need that. That kind of cleans up the spreadsheet for us a little bit. And for our grand totals, we're going to turn off, let's turn off rows and columns. That doesn't make that much of an impact right there. For our pivot table styles, let's see, we've got a more option here. We have a whole list of different pivot table styles we can do. And again, as we highlight this, you can see it formats this very nice and neat for us, and it gives us this preview so we can see how it's going to be lined out as we hover above these. And again, it's non-destructive till we actually click. I like the blue. Let's go ahead and click here and go from there. Now the next step would be publishing this out through the website. I can only get through the basic part of the publishing, so we select the Office button, Publish. This would be out through Excel services. We'll take a chance on it just to see if it works. We'll go out to My Site. Looks like it's bringing up the basic site itself. We'll go to Shared Documents. We'll try to save it. We'll say Customer Price List, but I'm guessing it's not going to save this out. No, we still have the same error. So again, I apologize for not being able to show this out through the Excel services. I'll see what I can do about getting this demo recreated, and when I do that, I can post some information out to my blog, which I'll provide that in the question and answer pane, and we can get some small shorts that show this being actually saved out as well. So with that, I'm going to head back into the slides. We got a few more slides for the final wrap up, and then we'll wrap up the Q&A on this. All right, so Excel also includes simple means by which the authors can make use of the Excel services. We saw how we tried to do the File Publish menu option, and there's a new option there called Excel Services. So we tried that a couple of times, and my demo environment must have something that's not set up properly. But it enables the users to save the spreadsheets out either to a SharePoint server or to any UNC path that we have that is accessible on the server. So while a full copy of the spreadsheet is copied to the server, the Excel Services option dialog box that we have, that enables the author to specify what aspects of this are going to be accessible to the users from the web browser itself. So it's only going to display portions of the website, and the author has total control over all of those aspects. Now this is configurable at the granularity of a specific named item. So named items can be things such as the sheets, a named cell. They can be ranges of cells as we defined in our example. You can have a specific table or even a pivot table or charts that will get displayed as a part of this. And once the author has those named specific items set up, the items command in the workgroup menu, that will allow him or her to browse through those items, select which ones are going to be viewable or not viewable by the end users. Now the visibility of the data under the scenarios that get governed by the Excel Services option, this is also going to apply to API calls, and it's not just the direct viewing by the users. So this mechanism constitutes a true means of control over what data is visible and by whom. So in order to make these named items readily available for the users, either in reports or business dashboards, the Excel Web Access provides a familiar interface for the users to use among those viewable items. Also, since the named items remain part of the workgroup itself that's loaded out through Excel Services, they remain fully refreshable, fully interactive without requiring the user to be able to see the underlying business logic and data or even the data source. Now, access to external data is one key to the power of the Excel services. Making use of the existing data sources in a highly configurable and secure fashion. The spreadsheets can connect to live data sources, as we mentioned earlier. We do this by means of the user-friendly mechanisms that we showed in the demos that enable general users to take advantage of the technology without any other sort of additional assistance. Now, one powerful way of governing access to the external data sources is by using the data connection libraries. This gets created by database administrators and the DCLs, the data connection libraries. They contain Office data connections or ODC connection files that persist specific data connections. This enables business users to take advantage of them using the Excel client through a directory service operated by the server itself. Now, business users, they can identify the connections they need that are contained within the DCLs using user-friendly names and descriptions, and they don't have to know about the technical details or require any specialized knowledge of that. Now, the ability to make persistent connections to external data sources visible to users themselves, this capability allows the connections to external data sources to be reusable. This allows business users to take advantage of them within Excel without, again, having to know those external details. Second, there's the ability to support updating large numbers of reports at once. Since the data connection libraries allow changes to be made to the external data source to automatically propagate and refresh to Excel 2007 and the Excel Services workbooks, those workbooks don't have to be updated manually, and that lends towards additional efficiencies and avoids potential errors and liabilities that you might run into. And then finally with this, SharePoint permissions enable access control lists, so you can fully secure this in any way that you need. This allows you to control who is allowed to make changes to the data source definitions and who can see what data is there. The Excel services can also limit access to the external data through the 3 settings for the Excel Data Services options. And the default setting of none does not allow connections to any sort of external data connections. The DCL only setting allows only DCLs to govern connections to the external data sources, and DCLs or embedded connections from workgroups, that setting allows external data connections to be established by connection strings embedded in the workbooks themselves, in addition to allowing the data connection libraries as well. So by choosing one of these settings, it's possible to control the transfer of the data as needed, and these settings can also be configured on a per trusted location basis. This allows your administrators to configure the type of connectivity that's allowed to the different types of spreadsheets you might publish out. So for example, financial data. This might be stored to one location that's restricted to a limited number of authors, while other locations may have fewer restrictions as a part of this. So authenticating external data. There's a properties dialog box that's associated with the workgroup connections, the workbook connections in the Excel client that allows you to control server authentication. And you can choose from 3 different techniques to do this. So there's a none technique, and this does not take any special actions in terms of authentication. It simply forms a connection with the provided connection string, and that's it. It assumes that the username and the password are stored in the connection string, or that none are required. So if there is something that is required, you would have to provide that as a part of the connection string. There's also an SSO, or single sign-on technique, and this implies that the credentials are stored in a single sign-on store and an SSO ID that's provided at connection time. Now the Microsoft Office system provides an out-of-the-box SSO solution, and that can also be replaced by custom or home-built or third-party tools if you'd like. Finally, we do support Windows authentication. This relies on Windows authentication, which uses Kerberos to authenticate between computers unless the server and external data sources are on the same computer, and then we don't have to use that negotiation. To tailor the view for individual users in any of these cases, it is possible to set the workgroup to refresh the data from a server each time the workgroup is open, workbook is open, and to make it fail to open if the external data authentication fails, so we're not exposing things unnecessarily. Users in that case, they can only see the information to which they've been granted access. That avoids you inadvertently revealing inappropriate information by way of cached data, which is always a concern. All right, so that takes us to the end of this particular summary or session. In summary of all of this, the combination of the Excel 2007 and SharePoint, that provides us a very good, flexible, and secure method of accessing spreadsheets and granting that out in a multi-user basis across your organization. We have some new features inside of Excel to allow connections out to not just static, but live dynamic data sources. And this is a very good enterprise solution for spreadsheets that are going to be shared across a wide work group. I said I was going to have a link to some additional resources here, so if you want some more information on this, if you go out to our TechNet site, to microsoft.com/technet-dsk-110, this session is out there at this site. There's a lot of other backing information that will link out to the the Office's site, as well as the Office SharePoint site, and I would encourage you to go out there to check that out, particularly because there are some other webcasts and demos that actually show those connections that I was unable to show in my particular session. So at this point, I'm going to go and review some questions. I'm going to pass back to Eric and see if he needs to do any wrap-up, and I'll do some questions.
Okay, I just want to get the survey up and give you all a chance to fill it out. I do encourage you to use the all other registrants option today. There were some issues with the registered online option. So use the all other registrants option. I encourage you to fill it out. It's really valuable feedback to us. Lets us know how we're doing. There is also a comment section in there, so if you have any comments, general comments about the webcast, we do read those, so I encourage you to type those in there if you have them, in addition to giving the webcast any sort of numerical scores, 1 being low, 9 being excellent. So Chris, I see you had a couple questions you wanted to answer there. I want to give you some time to do that before we wrap it up.
Okay. All right, so again, Kathy, if you want to get more information about OLAP and Cube, those are really SQL-based functions, and again, I'm not a SQL expert, so I don't feel I'm really qualified to try and address those here. I'd probably get something wrong on that. So if you want more information, you can go and hit the SQL site, or send me an email, and I can give you some information through the SQL team. It's more on that. Oh, real quickly, someone asked where my blog is, so I'm going to go ahead and answer that. So for Greg, let me go ahead and provide both my email addresses and the blog. So chris.avis at Microsoft.com. Blog, we'll do blogs.technet.com/ChrisABI. All right. So question from Richard, will all of this work if the Excel spreadsheet has code? So the example being VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, running behind it. And yes, it should. There are some caveats to that, depending on how the VBA is written and how it's coded. It could cause some problems with it. Some of that information is already documented out on the Office SharePoint site, so I would encourage you to go out there. I'll see if I can find the specific link to that. I'll post that out to my blog as well. What is the expected release date for Windows SharePoint Services 3.0? Wow. I have not heard any dates in regards to that, and until something goes public, anything that I have heard I can't really speak about. So I apologize, but just to be transparent, I haven't heard anything about the release dates. So I don't have anything I can give to you directly on that. My guess would be to watch the SharePoint site out at Microsoft.com/SharePoint, or if you go out to the Microsoft.com/WSS for Windows SharePoint Services, that actually redirects you out to the Microsoft.com/servers site, and we generally make availability announcements about the products out there for the server-based information. So since the WSS actually relies on the Windows Server platform, it should get announced out through there. With that, I think that's it for the questions. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time coming to this session. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I'd be happy to answer your questions for you. I don't have all the answers, but I can get in touch with the people that do. So send those my way. I'll see what I can do for you. Again, thank you for your time. Go back to Eric.
All right. I do want to thank Chris Avis for presenting today, and thank you everyone for attending today's webcast. That concludes today's TechNet webcast. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.